Hey coaches, just got back from Galveston, Texas. I did a coaches clinic presentation, a couple presentations for the Gulf LSC. So one of the presentations is called The Art of On-Deck Coaching. We've actually got something on our site with that name, but this PowerPoint and the presentation that I've made is different. It's really everything together that I feel like is like stuff that coaches can be doing to just have better practices, do a better job, like get more out of it. Have the days that we go home and feel like, we really got something done and not have as many days where we feel like we might get an email from a parent. So that's kind of the goal with this presentation. Go. Art of On Deck Coaching. We want to make an impact, get to the pool and leave the pool fired up. Enjoy the process as coaches, right? We want to see things before they become a problem and be proactive with things. And it's up to us to figure it out. I think it's somewhat of a poison of, for coaches and for people in general to think like, I've heard it said on the pool deck, coach might say, this kid was ready, but then they took 3 days off and went to their uncle's wedding. And, that was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now we're at the meet, and now they're not ready because of that. I just think it's a cop-out for coaches to say that type of thing. Like in my case, I have to kind of watch it because I could say to myself or to others, yeah, these kids aren't coming to the morning practices. I could even at worst say it to the kids, like, you're not coming to the mornings. How do you think you're going to swim fast in the meet? I just choose not to say that type of thing because I know how that can impact athletes. And, if an athlete has made enough transgressions for me to remove them from the squad or from the particular training group, then I'll do that if it's necessary. But, I don't really do that. Might do a training group move every now and then, but I'd like to kind of like keep athletes within my squad and coach them up. And if they're not coming to morning practices, I've got to figure out a way to get them to morning practices. And as long as they're on my squad, it's up to me to figure out how to do that. So, I think we've got to make sure we don't blame others. I want to spend a few minutes talking about younger kids, and I don't want to spend the whole time talking about every point on this slide. Probably the most important point on the slide is at the very bottom, talking about the repetition. So with the younger kids in particular, I feel that if you're doing a set of 20 25s and you're doing one of each, that set is not as good as if you're doing a set of 20 25s, 5 of each. So the one of each set, you might be watching them come in on their back, their swing backstroke, and you want to correct something and you want to say something to them, but really the next thing that they're about to do is breaststroke. So we've got to make sure that we're able to offer practice, styles and set styles that offer the opportunity for repetition. So we've got to create that. And the second thing that I'd like to say about this age group of kids, and I think some of this has, you can think about 15-year-old kids as well. But, we think about technique a lot. We think about like, we've got to teach them the technique. We got to make sure that they look good. We don't want to give them some things that their technique is going to suffer and then they're not going to look good. And, we're giving them a set where they're just kind of breaking down. So we say that kind of thing to ourselves and to others, and we've kind of set up our programs like that. I think maybe to our detriment, because if we're not, let's put it this way, one of the best things that we can be doing coaching these younger kids is for part of the practice, giving them the opportunity to kind of jump through the hoop that the coach creates. And so we can use the pace clock for this. And, it's like the kids have to learn. They've got to come to practice and they've got to like do what the coach says within reason, right? I mean, we're kind of like asking them to do things. And, too often classroom, kind of like management is really the issue with kids, like with younger kids, like getting them to just behave and not be underwater and all that kind of stuff. So just us giving them some, 10 or 15 minute periods where they're, let's say, doing 1050s kick on a 130 interval. And you're saying, if you can go 55 seconds or better, that's an A. And if you can go a minute or better, that's a B or whatever, that type of thing can really be effective for the young kids. like the kickboard kick, because then the technique doesn't suffer at all. But I do think there can be times when you're giving them sets where you're not really that concerned about the technique. You're getting them to do the pace clock stuff. And then like in my view, let's say you got them to do the 1050s on 130 swim, and you just did it, and they're trying to hold under a minute, whatever the time is that you're going to have them hit. Then you can say, okay, now we're going to do it at a stroke count, right? And how they're going to work on their streamlining a little bit more because of that. And they're going to start to, for some kids, I mean, I worked with a group the other week where it would be maybe 4 or 5 50s on 2 minutes or something like that, with really young kids. And that group was 8-year-olds. But, it could be 9 or 10-year-olds that are doing that type of thing as well. But it's getting them to kind of like do the time is the first part. And then you can go into like something like a stroke count, or, you get them to streamline past the flags and do it, little things like that. So you can give them another hoop to jump through, where the first hoop has to do with the pace clock. I think the value to that is like when we're working on technique, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, how do they really know that they've done a good job? It's kind of hard to tell. When you have the pace clock, it's like either they do it or they don't, and they know they either did it or they didn't. And you can actually give some people some atta-girls and some atta-boys that are like concrete, you did this, good job, and they can start to get that kind of rapport going with the coach. If it's all technique, you can kind of be like, yeah, that looks good. But of course, you can't just keep saying that, because then, does it really look good? Because it's always good. So, it's really hard to kind of grade people in that way. But doing it with the pace clock, you've got that easy grading thing. And I think that's easier for kids to understand. So let's set that up a little bit more, I think. Okay, moving on. The dominoes teaching style. It's a great teaching style. Look at all those kids in the lane. If I'm teaching them a new skill, and I've got 4 or 5 kids in 4 or 5 lanes, and I send them all 16 or 20 of them at the same time, and it's a new skill, I'm a great teacher on the pool deck, probably not going to get, and this is the case a lot with me, I get like half of the group to kind of have like a B-, and they're like, okay, maybe a couple kids are getting a B or an A, but most of the kids are like kind of in the middle. They're not really getting it. And then they get to the end of the 25 where they're all doing it, and you're like, all right, now I got to explain it differently. They do it again, or maybe you get somebody to do an example thing and do it again. But in general, they're all moving as a unit. And it's teaching a new skill. I think you can find a much more effective way to do it. And it does take some time to actually get the group to understand how to do this dominoes teaching style. So you have to spend like an extra 10 minutes, maybe once or twice, to get a group to kind of get it. But once you've done it, then the group gets it. And then every time you teach a new skill, you can just go into, I tell the kids we're doing dominoes. I know what's going on. I tell them who's going to start and figure it out. So the way you do it is you've got all the kids on the wall, and you take one kid and you essentially talk to that kid in front of everybody else, because they're kind of talking to everybody, and you teach that kid how to do the skill. And the kid pushes off the wall, does his or her best to do the skill, and he does a 25 of the skill. It doesn't really matter where you stand, but everybody should be able to hear you. You give some instructions on how to fix it up a little bit. Then the kid comes back, they've fixed it up a little bit. Maybe they're not perfect with it yet, but they've done some good things. Like every now and then I'll go to 425s. Usually I'll stick with 2. Usually 2's enough to teach the skill a little bit. And then everybody on the wall has been watching this entire process. So they're watching the mess ups, they're watching the fixes, and they're basically going to start their own thing at a higher grade just because of that. Then the other advantage to doing the dominoes style is, and really this is where the dominoes part comes in, is you get, usually it's that kid again, to just go ahead and take off and do a 25. And so now kids are going to watch that kid do it again. And you teach the kids that once that person gets to the cone or gets to the flags or gets to the middle, then the next kid goes. And so you just go down the lane, or down the, kind of like, let's say you do lane 1 first, then you go to lane 2, then you go to lane 3, then you go to lane 4. Once the kid in lane 4 goes, that's kind of leading that lane, then the kid in lane 1 that's going second knows, okay, now it's my turn. Now I go and they start the process again, lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, lane 4. So to have 16 kids do a 25, it does take longer. It's going to take a couple minutes, but each kid is now watching each other, and they know that they're being watched. They're being watched by the coach a lot more. I mean, sometimes those kids, when they're all going as a herd and they're going third in the lane and they're just in the middle, they're kind of slopping through the drills in part because they know they're not really being watched and they might not be called out. It's kind of like being in class and like hoping that teacher doesn't call on you. They're kind of in that mode. Whereas it's like the dominoes thing forces it to be like everybody's getting called on. Everybody has to stand up and do the recitation or something like that. So they're under pressure. They know they are under pressure. And so that raises their initial grade up a little bit. And you can really see what you've got. You've got a little bit more focus. And, then of course there's some correcting that's happening. I mean, I'm usually like kind of down at the start end at the beginning. And then I kind of like, as now I've got like 3, 4, 5 kids on the wall, I'm starting to walk along the bulkhead to get to the other end of the pool. And the kids are all now coming to the other end of the pool. And I'm saying things to kids as they're getting there. Sometimes I'm like, okay, that was it. You got it. Or sometimes, I'll give some instruction. And again, like all the kids are now listening to all these things because there's a lot of time, in particular at the beginning of the teaching of the drill. So I think this can be a really effective way to teach. Certainly, once you get it, a lot more time effective because they're just going to be better at it right away. All right, adjusting the lanes. I'm super proud of my training group right now because they're doing this on their own, but we've got to be good at getting the athletes in different lanes. I feel like most workouts, if the athletes aren't moving themselves around, as we get closer to a main set or maybe a kicking set, I'm actually writing on a piece of paper the names and the lanes and kind of figuring out where people are going to go so I can put them in the right spot. So this is an actual, this picture that I put up is actually what happened one of our days in practice. This is actually from a few years ago. You can see on the top, that's how they started. That was basically what they were doing for warm up. And then at the bottom, that's where they ended up. That's where I moved them. And out of the, it's 15, let's see, it's 16 athletes there, I think. There's 5 of them that remained in the same spot for the main set. So most of the group got moved. So what I did, in this case, I had 5 lanes. I had Teddy in lane 5 leading the lane. And I didn't feel like in this day, I think was kind of an aerobic freestyle day. I felt like Teddy wasn't quite going to be where the other guys were going to be. So I moved him to go, because we go 10 back. So I moved him to go 10 back of Harry. And he's going right next to Hans. I felt like those two were going to be able to, they were an even match and they were going to race through the set. And then really, I got a lot of people just kind of in those matches, those 2-person matches. One of the things that I have here is I have Caitlin, who I remember that day, she was coming off an injury and wasn't feeling that good. So I purposefully put her 15 back instead of 10 back. Normally she'd be 10 back, not really get the draft. And so I felt like going 15 back and getting a little bit of a draft from Teddy was going to be good for her and kind of set her up for, not having any problems during the set. And not having someone draft off of her. That can happen. And I wanted her to start the set smooth and not have to be kind of looking over her shoulder at somebody. So I made that adjustment. So right now, my group is just like, when I'm not doing it, they're doing it. It really seems like they've got a great sense of, hey, coach wants us to do this, and if we don't do it, he's going to do it. So let's figure it out. I do a lot of different things with lane stuff. There's one athlete who this year started she was new in the group and started, I stand in the back of the lanes, and then sometimes I'll stand on the bulkhead. And so that's near, we'll call it lane 1. And she was over in lane 4 to start the season. Just that's where she put herself. And I just found that we had a much better rapport as I moved her to lane 1. I told her, I was like, I'm almost always yelling at you. and I need to teach you the stroke technique and I need to kind of talk with you about it. So I'm moving you over here, and let's just kind of like do this for a little while. So now actually about a month ago, she started to have a lot of success. And one of her good friends is kind of over on the other side of the pool a lot. And she's like always talking to her. And one day I was like, you just want to move over there? And she's like, yeah, like move over. I was like, we're done with we're good now. Like I just didn't want to get started with you being new in the group. And I'm just projecting, I'm just kind of yelling every instruction at you. So we're done with that. Now you get it. You know that I'm not like yelling at you. So you can move over. So now she kind of goes back and forth, but mainly stays over closer to where her friend is. Excuse me. Who gets the attention and when? This is something that I think about that I think is a little bit different. Well, first of all, I definitely am going to give the attention to the people who are in the back of the lanes more often during warmups. I'm finding times to motivate athletes, to get athletes to do a better job on the little things, because they're the athletes that during a main set, I'm just not going to have the same amount of time with. If we do a set of 100s on 115, an athlete that's leading the lane goes a minute. On average, I get 15 seconds. They do 20 of those, 20 times 15, do the math. I've got a pretty good amount of time to come up with some, if I need to talk with the athlete, or if the athlete needs to speak with me, or we need to have instruction during the set, it's going to happen. But if you're going third and you're going 105s, first off, you're getting 5 seconds less rest every time. Do the math on 20 times that. So that makes a difference. And, this is, by the way, a great way to explain it to parents. But that athlete also is going third in the line. So by the time that athlete gets to the wall, I'm already talking with, generally speaking, another athlete. I mean, the only way I can really focus on the people going third in the line during the main set is to basically ignore the people that are going first and second and just wait until they come in and then talk with them. Now, that's actually something that I do during a main set also. So kids back of the line, they get attention during the warm up, but also they get attention during a main set at the beginning of the set, because in a lot of cases, I've already spoken with the lane leaders, maybe prior to practice, just here and there during the practice about what's expected on the main set. And in many cases, I'm interested in the athletes that are at the front of the lanes, starting with just good rhythm, getting into the set, not overdoing the beginning of the set. So, I purposefully pull back and don't time them at the very beginning a lot. I kind of just let them get into it, because, I've messed it up in the past where I've overdone it and been too exuberant at the beginning, let's go. And then they're kind of fading at the end. So I just feel let them get into the set. But the people in the back, oftentimes it's helpful if they have increased focus at the beginning of the set, just to make sure that they have a good set. So, it's not every set. Sometimes I'm looking at the lanes, trying to make sure I did all the lane switches that I want to do correctly and see how things are flowing with the set. So I'm a little bit more just management of things. But in terms of either getting their time or really being vocal and talking with them about what they need to do during the set, I'll work my way from the back of the lane to the front of the lane. So as we get towards the middle of the set, just kind of work my way up towards the middle. And then as we get to the end of the set, then I'm really working with the athletes that are in the lead of the lane, going second in the lane the most, calling out more times, really talking with them, motivating them, that type of thing. Now that actually happens also with one repeat. So for instance, if we're doing a 400 freestyle fast, and it's at the end of the set and I'm on the side of the pool and I really want to fire them up, and get them going on the last one, I'm careful where I walk. I'm aware of where I walk. So I'll start at the back, and I've generally got 4 people in a lane. So I'll go with the 4th people first. I'll say ready, go for everybody. And I'm kind of on the side. And then as the 4th group goes, I'll either just go with them or I'll wait a 50 and then I'll go with them and I'll wave them on, and I'll do that for a 50 or 2. And then I'll just move up. So then I'll get the 3rd people and I'll kind of motivate them. get them going. And now let's say we're like 150 into the 400 free. And as we get into the halfway point, and I'm starting to move up to people that are going second and people that are going first, and really trying to bring them home on the end of the repeat. So I don't know. I think it makes a difference. I mean, how often do we get the kids that are, the kids at the beginning, at the front of the lane, a lot of the times, for me, they're going out fast enough anyways on something like that. So I'm like trying to get them to split it well and not overdo it. But how often do we get to the end of something like that and we're like, well, we got like 3 really good swims, but then we got like a bunch of people getting run over, and it's like, if you follow the kids that are going 4th and 3rd in the lane through the first 200, they're probably, in my lanes, they're going to get lapped, but they're going to know that the coach is really invested in what they're doing, and they're going to try to like get lapped and still keep swimming without having to stop. I mean, we do have people stop every now and then getting past, because sometimes you don't want to get hurt. It's like, got to. But generally speaking, in my training group, people don't stop. The people that are in the front of the lanes are throughout a set communicating with the people in the back of the lanes. Like, okay, I'm going this way, you stay on the lane line, or you stay on the lane line. I'm going on a lane line, you go over here, that kind of thing. So that sort of thing needs to happen with groups, that type of communication. Moving on. Lane spacing, 10 back beats 5 back if you got the room. For so many reasons, you've got the ability with 10 back to really communicate with the athletes. It's like, you go 5 back, ready, go for the first group, and then you don't have really any time to say anything but ready, go for the next group. Let's say that's what you're doing. You're starting the groups. And I've tried to do it, and it sounds rushed if you do. If you got 5 back, it just sounds rushed. If you got 10 back, what ends up happening is you end up kind of saying it. And, I do think, and, you'll see on another slide, I do think you got to repeat what you say to get to everybody, but you can, if people are going 10 back, oftentimes take care of everybody with saying it once. Because if you go 10 back and you kind of wait until 5 seconds into that, and you've got like an instruction, then the 10 back group hears it, but so does the 15 back, and so does the 20 back group, in some cases, depending on the set. And I just like 10 back in particular with the performance end, because it's just easier to go fast when you're 5 back. And I just like the 10 back. I think it's appropriate for people to do when possible. You can't do it every time. With my top group, I do it almost all the time, but I guess there are sets that we found that going 5 back is better. But one of the things I've learned is that sometimes going 10 back, and even 10 and 20 back, can be helpful even when you're doing longer stuff and people are going to get past. And it's actually more helpful. Let's say you've got athletes that are going 5 back and 10 back. You're going 3 in a lane, and you're doing 400s, and they're varying. People are going to go 4 minutes, people are going to go 4:30 or whatever, and they're going to get past. If you've got people that are only going 5 back, when that person gets past, it's hard for that lane leader to pass them, because usually those 2 people are bunched up. So if you go 10 back, 20 back, even though that puts the 20 back person maybe in a position to get past, where, if you went 5 and 10 back, they wouldn't, be in that position. Well, I guess in that case, you would go 5 and 10 back and just alleviate the whole problem. But I think sometimes there's a case for going 10 and 20 back and just having some spacing. Like maybe if you're doing 800s and like there's just going to be some passing anyways, give them 10 and 20 and not 10 and 15, so that there's just a little bit more space, and you're going to get past anyways. Make it safer and a little easier for people to pass. Okay, moving on. Staggering the send-off. So this is something that, if you really follow what's on here, I hope it makes sense. And I have put out videos of like how I've done this, but you basically picture that you've got 8 lanes of kids and you're doing this set here, 20 50s on a minute, odds are fast, evens are cruise, and you're trying to get times for all 32 kids, right? So you're trying to do that in a span of 20 or 25 seconds. That is like, I don't even know if that's possible. That's really tough. So what I do in that kind of situation, and I do it also when I've only got 5 lanes, I do like 2 lanes and then 3 lanes. I start one group on 0, and I start the next group on like basically whatever, it's like half of the number of the cycle of the set. So this type of thing works like with this type of set, like an active rest set. And the cycle is 1 fast, 1 easy, which is 2 minutes. So I'll send them off a minute apart. So if I was doing something else, like let's say I was going 12 150s every third one fast, and they were on 2 minutes, then that's a 6-minute cycle. Then I would send them off 3 minutes apart. But, really what I would do is I would write it out. I'd write out pretty much exactly what I just wrote out here, which is like, okay, you're going to leave on the 0. The first group's going to come in on the 30. Next group's going to come in about the 41. Next group's the 47. And the next group to 53. So I can take care of 4 groups doing, from a 30 to a 38 second 50, and then still have 7 seconds to kind of clear my watch and sort of walk, a little bit over to the next lanes and say, okay, ready, go, and get them on their 50. Now, it does mean that you're going to be timing every single one of the 50s. They're going every other one fast. You're timing them all. You're just walking back and forth. But, you don't have to time them all. You can just time the last half of the set or whatever it is. But you're timing these lanes like kind of just walking across the pool. And if you do that, you can actually get the times, because then you're getting 16 times at a time. And then, of course, sometimes the kids tie. So let's say out of the 16 kids, you're getting like 11 or 12 times. And then you can move over and get 11 or 12 times, and you can really be accurate with what you're doing. And I think the other advantage to this is, you can time all of them, right? And let's just say, for argument's sake, that you could actually get all of their times. Let's say you didn't have 4 per lane, you had 2 or 3 per lane, at 8 lanes, kind of get most of their times. Well, you're going to end up just yelling it, and it's going to sound potentially rushed and kind of like, it's just sort of like you're just trying to give them their times. I think you can be a little bit more calm with it, a little bit more like in control with it, as opposed to just like scrambling to make sure everybody gets their time every time. So I think that's one of the advantages for doing this. I do it pretty often when I've got 8 lanes and I'm doing a set like this. The athletes definitely, it's another thing, you got to kind of teach them how to do it. It's another one of those things where the first time you do it, there's some instruction that happens. It's going to take you 5 or 10 minutes. And the athletes are going to be like, wait, what are we doing? But then once you explain it to them and they do it, they're like, oh, okay, get it. And they like it too, because they feel like, the coach is like just really focused on their 4 lanes, and you are. Moving on. So good teams talk. That's something that we've talked about with the Swim Coach Academy. We've talked about good teams talk in a number of ways, and we'll not go through it too much here, but yeah, they've got it. We've got to communicate much like a basketball team. Athletes can take the communication aspect of it to the, on themselves, and kind of help the coaches out and have a lot more fun with practice. I love to say with 11 and 12-year-old kids, call it out, and they call it out, and they have a lot of fun calling out the top, and you get 1 or 2 kids that know what's going on, and then you can get the other kids to figure out what's going on. So the athletes can help themselves. And that's what communication is all about in this case for swimming. So this is something that's really important, being proactive with the try-hard kids. This is a picture of Katie Hoff getting in the pool in the 2004 Olympic camp. She was absolutely a try-hard. Look at her. She's even got all the Olympic swimmers like not ready at all. And she's like, all right, let's go. So for her, I had to develop some of these strategies. And not only with Katie, but I ended up coaching a lot at that point in time between 2004 and 2009, a number of athletes that set national age group records or ranked #1 in the country, and they're young. And I'm like, and sometimes they're training with like older dudes, or older girls, and they, don't necessarily want to stand out all the time. Not all of them. Sometimes they're kind of like embarrassed. They don't want to get called out in the locker room for trying too hard in the warm up, or in the pool for trying too hard in the warm up. You could have athletes. We squash that on our team. But one of the things that we do is we're proactive. So we do squash it. It's reacting. But we do things like when the athletes are in the pool, let's say you're doing a set of 100s and like this young up and coming 13-year-old kid is going to be holding 59s. You say to the group, I'd like to have 6 athletes holding 59 or better on this set. Or you could even say, if we get 6 athletes holding 59 or better on this set, then the next set of 30 50s will become 24 50s. Give the athlete, give the group a reason to look to that athlete and either say, well, that athlete's going fast because the coach is like wanting that athlete to go fast. You're saying it publicly. You're not just like going up to the athlete before practice and being like, okay, we're going to do this at 100s. I'd like you to be under a minute. I think that's what your average should be. You can do that if you want, but you should also, even if you do that, help the athlete out. The athlete's going to be sitting there in the pool, especially those young up and coming athletes that train with the older kids. They're going to be sitting there in the pool going, thank you for saying that. Thank you. Kicking some 50s, that athlete could probably get under 30. And you're not going to say, you might say, like you to go under 30, or like you to go 29 and say it in front of the group. So the athlete's like, got to go 29. But saying like giving the kind of like a group goal of like, let's see if we can get 6 athletes to go under or 3 athletes to go under. And depending on the dynamic, every now and then giving them a carrot, that can be really helpful for that athlete. Also, you can target relay goals. If you've got really good standout swimmer and you're kind of like trying to help them not feel like they're sort of like that kid, then talk about the relays, talk about the championships, talk about anything. Get the psych sheet, talk about the other teams that are going to be there and how you're going to try to get top 3 or win the relay. And that'll give everybody an ability to work together and get them to do relay starts together, get them to do a relay in practice, see where they are. So I think there's so many ways that we can help out these young up and coming athletes with being proactive and talking to them in front of their peers. So talked a lot within the Swim Coach Academy about a lot of this stuff: stroke count match, guess your time, stroke technique work. These are all things that you use to not only get the athlete better, but to kind of like connect with the athlete, and just like create that kind of working relationship with the athlete. So, it's not just about going fast and like developing these skills, but it's about developing the kind of rapport that you should have with somebody that you're going to work with for a couple of years at a time for 340 plus days a year. Great quote here. Praise effort over results. Let's talk about that first. So when the athletes are doing great things, great to say congratulations when they make a cut, that kind of thing. You don't want to just ignore it and be weird like that. But in general, you want to praise the effort over the results and praise the fact that they were able to get to the pool early, do the land work, that kind of thing. And I think that kind of helps take the pressure off the athlete too, because they can replicate, that sort of thing. Having a sleep routine, doing better with their nutrition, whatever. And then the quote, with one eye focused on the destination, you've only one eye with which to find your way. And that's by Joe Hyman's, who's actually, it's not by him, but it was used by him in his book, Zen and the Art of Martial Arts. And it's listed, I think, as a Buddhist proverb in the book. So anyways, I put that on here. I feel like if you're always thinking about kind of like your rankings and times, whether it be as a coach or a swimmer, things start to get pretty old pretty quick, and it can really wear on the swimmers. So that's another reason as coaches, we've got to praise, the effort and try to stay away from just, constant focus on best times. I mean, I think there's a place for that. I prefer breakthroughs other than best times, but I think there is a place for that. Like athletes that haven't done a best time for a year. I mean, going to best time is a big deal. Definitely I'm going for that with some athletes for sure. But in general, going for the breakthroughs, praising the results. All right, moving on. If you're stern with an athlete, don't walk away. If you're stern with an athlete, you've got to give them the chance to do a better job. And so, like, whether it be just they're not doing a good job with a certain thing with technique, and like, being stern with them about technique for me is like, we've been working on it for weeks and you're not doing it, on your own without me telling you or something like that. So that's maybe a different subject. But let's say you're being stern with an athlete because they weren't at morning practice or something like that, and you're telling them they got to be at morning practice. So when they get in the pool and they train in the afternoon practice, like, it's over. Don't like give an athlete crap more than once. Don't give them crap twice. So once you tell them that they didn't do a good job of something, it's over. And then I think you want to actively stand there and get ready to watch them prove themselves to you, and at least be standing there noticing them. If not, actually saying something. I mean, I'll say stuff to athletes like, I see you. That's all I'll say. Like, but gave them like crap or something, and then they got in, they're working hard because they know how I feel. Like, and or I'll be like, don't call it a comeback. Like maybe in different situations. Maybe that's not a practice in this situation, but I'll just say little things like that to athletes that let them know that I'm watching them and I see them. Or if, let's say somebody went on vacation and I didn't want them to go on vacation, and I was really mad at them. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but I was, and they left, went away from me. Now coming back, and it's weird. And you're like, what do I do? When in doubt, coach them up. So they get in the pool, and you don't have to talk to them, be emotional about like all the different stuff, like going away, back, get back to work. Like, you don't have to do any of that. In fact, advise you not to. Let them get back in the pool, and then use the practice, use the training to reestablish the relationship, the rapport, the proper rapport with the athlete. Again, this is in the case where, like, you said something, then they went away, they come back, and it could be like you said something, then they went home, came back the next day. Things are a little bit cold or different. Let them get in the pool and then coach them up. And then through that, you'll see how, like, they'll get out of the pool after practice, and it'll be more over than it was. Maybe it'll be totally over. And because the athlete, I think, sometimes is walking around on eggshells, and they're not sure where the coach is. So the coach has got to be like, even if the coach, I don't think it's good to be like, all right, now let's start over. Like, look, what said was said. Hopefully you didn't say anything you need to apologize for. So let them get back in, go from there. So it can really help break the ice and allow us to, not have to think about those types of things for days on end and lose sleep about it. Health circles. So this is something that I think about all the time. And so I just drew the circles to kind of illustrate it. You can think about kids who have the flu, right? Look at the circle on the left. You've got a fairly healthy group with only 2 kids that are kind of sick. Maybe one kid on the outer circle's got the flu. The other kid's got like a pretty bad head cold. And other than that, the group's pretty healthy. They're either real healthy or, maybe they got some allergies. They're in the second circle or something. Well, you've got to notice when the group goes towards the circle on the right, because maybe in the case of the flu, you go like canceled morning practice or something like that, right? Or just general sickness. You can kind of notice, okay, we've got more people sick right now in the middle of the week than you usually have. Maybe we need to cancel Thursday morning practice. So you can also notice, with shoulder health and physical health, that has to do with like, people that have like injuries. Like, I've heard it said about shoulders. This is something that's like also, I think, a cop out for coaches, is like these shoulder injuries are contagious. Now, this is something that I've heard it said with coaches, like, it's probably because, for me, I take the blame. So I'm like, it's probably because we're not doing the land work prior to the practice. Or I go back and I think like, well, maybe what did we do last week? Like, did we do too much freestyle all in a row? What happened? And so I take the responsibility, and maybe there's nothing there, but I'm at least going to investigate, like, why are more than one, like if you got one person that's having a shoulder thing, that's pretty normal. It's like I kind of tend to cycle through. Nobody's got any debilitating things on my squad, but people cycle through having little things, and they've got little things they do to kind of help them, help themselves out with that. But basically, you've got to notice you got a bunch of people getting shoulder injuries, you got to switch it up. I mean, if I have people that come down like the right with shoulder injuries, I'm like, all right, we're gonna start doing more land stuff. We got to, like, even if we don't get in on time, we got to do it. So I also think you can think about it with mental health. I mean, I think about it with just basic, people being a little bit depressed, and then, maybe they talk with their friends, which is terrific. It's great. But, people tend to kind of like latch on to other people's problems and that kind of thing. So you just have to kind of watch that, just make sure your group is good. So, okay, moving on. This one is something that's pretty controversial. Um, I really try to handle things well with people that are coming in late. I mean, first of all, kids get their license. I always tell them, like, please don't run a stoplight to get to my practice on time. Now, if I got kids that are late all the time, I'm having a conversation with them, right? I mean, a couple months ago, I had a conversation with a parent. That kid has corrected and done a much better job getting to practice on time. But like, I'm not going to do that unless it starts to become a pattern. So if I've got kids that are just late here and there, I really don't like tell them, like, I don't really like give them crap when they get to the pool. So what I do is I set them up for practice. Now, sometimes I don't say anything to them, for sure. There's sometimes when I'm like, here's the warm up, there you go. I do that a lot. You definitely don't do what I'm about to explain like more than half of the time. But I find times when they're late to talk with them about the practice that's coming up, talk to them about the main set, give them an indication on what I want them to do for the kicking times on the kicking set, something that they're coming in late, they're kind of like, is coach going to like tell me that I'm a bad person for coming in late? Well, if they're kind of thinking you're going to be doing that, and then you give them an assignment, then they sure do want to do that assignment well. Because they're like, okay, so I'm sort of on probation. Like, I'm not in trouble for coming in late, especially if I do that. So they do even a better job with the set. So they kind of think like that, I feel. And then, also when they get out and they go to the bathroom or something like that, I'll use that opportunity as they're coming back to do a similar type of thing. And then sometimes I'll use the opportunity to maybe give them an attagirl or an attaboy about a meet, even if they're late to practice. Or I'll tell them that they need to be better at this aspect of a certain race, and I'll give them just like a 1 minute conversation, maybe two. Try not to make it too long, especially if they're late. You don't want to be doing that. These kids they got teammates in the pool that are training. So those kids are like watching to do all this stuff. So keep it quick, but I think if you keep it quick, you can really motivate some kids by doing that. Here's another instance that's a little bit controversial, but I think can be really effective. If a family's taking a kid away for vacation or for anything, hey, it could be a vacation, could be your aunt and uncle's wedding or something like that. And I think it's a really good idea, in particular if you're close to a meet like the last week, and the kid's done fairly well with your training group. They've got to do stuff kind of with the family. We overreact to that too often. I mean, I know I have. And it's like the kid can't really do anything about it anyways. And so like our overreaction really can kind of mess things up. Then we got to like deal with their parents if we overreact, or we got to deal with the kids if we overreact. So we really can do well. In particular, like I said, the kid's done a pretty good job. We can say things like, well, there's nothing that's going to stop you. I mean, I've said that. I actually came up with this because I just did it one day. I had a kid that was there all the time. Had to go away for 3 days. It was like a month, or maybe it was 3 weeks away from a big meet, and they were approaching it like, coach is going to be mad. And my reaction was like, well, you've done so awesome this whole year. Like 3 days off is going to stop you? Really? No way. I refuse to believe it. I mean, you're like, you could do like almost nothing from here on out. You're ready to go. And so, I mean, you can kind of overdoing it right there a little bit, but I think you can do that. And the athlete is like, yeah, right. And they can really get some confidence from that interaction. So might not happen that often, but everybody deals with this a couple times a year. Might have one kid once every now and then that can kind of get this conversation instead of kind of you being like, you can either say nothing, or you can kind of like be mad. Saying this can be really impactful. The art of restraint, we've discussed this a little bit here on the Swim Coach Academy, but it's like saying things like, let's talk about it after practice, or let me get back to you on that, can be really, really helpful. And prior to meets, I think anticipating people who are going to have little problems and being able to kind of just be relaxed with it instead of saying, and making the problem bigger. You being relaxed and saying like, okay, you're good. Let's just get in, kind of warm up, or let's do a couple things on the land. Let's get in, warm up, and maybe it might feel better like every 10 minutes, 15 minutes as you go through the warm up. It's only like 7 o'clock in the morning right now. We all need to kind of get up, stretch it out a little bit. Everything's going to be good. So like having that kind of thing ready to go instead of like not having it ready to go. And the athlete comes up and they're like, and you're like, sometimes I think that's recipe for overreaction. So that's about all I have for this particular presentation. I hope this has been helpful for everybody. Have a great day. See ya.